Something hidden has sustained all of spiritual history. There is a secret so deep that even cunning Satan dared not uncover it. Have you ever wondered if there is a truth capable of transforming human weakness into divine strength? And for that very reason, it was guarded from the enemy. Every detail of creation echoes this mystery. God, in his wisdom, designed a plan that eludes logic, stirring restlessness in hearts and silencing dark legions. What could be powerful enough to revolutionize everything, from suffering to redemption? Feel the call. Watchman Nee points toward an experience that transcends mere concepts, accessible to anyone who truly surrenders at the cross. It is not apparent strength. It is weakness converted into absolute power, impossible for Satan to imitate. Few know this gateway. The real battle is not in the desperate pursuit of power, but in the willingness to live the mystery reserved for those who dare to believe without seeing. Pay attention, what is about to be revealed may redefine your spiritual story. This video is your invitation. Let yourself cross the veil. Open up to the only secret capable of freeing, restoring, and shattering your limitations. Do not look away, because it will only become clear to those who stay until the end. There is a dimension of Christian existence that few perceive, a secret guarded so carefully that even Satan could not unravel it. At the center of this truth lies a paradox. God hid his most devastating power in apparent human weakness. Watchman Nee taught that the enemy can imitate many things, but can never reproduce the strength that is born from total surrender to the cross. With each attempt to strengthen oneself through personal effort, the believer moves away from true power. Human nature struggles incessantly, imagining it can please God through determination and discipline. But there is something deep that resists this logic. The more someone empties themselves, the more space they create for divine power to operate. This is not merely an intellectual concept. It is an experience that radically transforms the way of living. When the ego truly dies on the cross, something resurrects that the world of darkness cannot touch or understand. Satan knows brute force, manipulation, pride disguised as spirituality, but is completely unaware of the potency that emanates from assumed weakness. The secret lies in the total inversion of values. Where the world sees defeat, God sees victory. Where people perceive limitation, the spirit finds freedom. This revelation is not for everyone, but only for those who are willing to die completely to themselves, discovering that death is the path to true life. The tension grows when one understands that this is not a truth to be understood, but to be lived. Each moment of genuine surrender reveals more of this hidden reality. What seemed to be the end becomes the beginning of something that surpasses all human expectation and confuses the adversary's strategies. Spiritual battle is fought on invisible terrain, but its effects are absolutely real. Watchman Nee described how the mature believer faces attacks that go beyond flesh and common sin. There are supernatural forces that only manifest when someone reaches deeper levels of communion with God. This war is not fought with conventional weapons or human strategies. The enemy attacks the spirit directly, trying to confuse, discourage, and weaken those who have discovered the power of the cross. But there exists a position of spiritual authority that remains unshakable, that occupied by one who has died completely to themselves. The problem arises when believers imagine that spiritual growth means less conflict. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. The closer someone gets to God's heart, the more intense the opposition from darkness becomes. But there is a fundamental difference. The battle is no longer fought in one's own strength, but in the power of resurrection. Satan can defeat the flesh, can manipulate the soul, can even imitate certain spiritual phenomena. However, there is a zone where he cannot penetrate, the life of Christ manifested through a vessel completely emptied of itself. This is the impregnable fortress that the enemy attempts but never manages to conquer. The revelation deepens. It is not about an external battle, but an interior reality. When the believer learns to live constantly in the position of death to the ego, they discover they possess a spiritual authority that is independent of circumstances, feelings, or external attacks. This is the secret that God kept from satanic knowledge. The outer man must be broken so that the inner man can be released. Watchman Nee explained that there exists a permanent conflict between these two dimensions. The soul pulls one way, the spirit another. Until this tension is resolved through the cross, God's power remains blocked. This breaking does not happen all at once, but is a continuous process. Each day, new areas of the ego emerge, demanding new surrender. The believer learns that taking up the cross daily is not a burden, but the only way to experience true freedom and spiritual power. There is a crucial difference between carnal weakness and spiritual weakness. The first must be fought and surrendered to death. The second must be embraced as a channel for the manifestation of divine power. Paul understood this in glorying in his infirmities, knowing that in them Christ's power was perfected. The mystery reveals itself. God chose what is weak to confound what is strong. This is not just a divine strategy, but a fundamental spiritual law. When someone completely assumes their fragility and incapacity, they create the perfect space for omnipotence to manifest without obstacles. The experience becomes increasingly real. The believer discovers they can live in a dimension where human limitations become points of contact with God's infinite power. This is the truly supernatural life, not one that denies humanity, but one that offers it completely as a vessel for divinity. The normal Christian life is not lived by one's own will, but by God's life operating through a surrendered heart. There is an enormous difference between deciding to be a Christian and allowing Christ to live through oneself. The first approach produces effort and frustration. The second, natural flow of power and peace. When prayer becomes truly spiritual, it ceases to be an attempt to convince God to do human will. It transforms into the expression of divine will through a spirit in perfect harmony with the Father's heart. This is a prayer that the enemy cannot intercept or prevent. The principle of life governs everything. It is no longer about asking whether something is right or wrong, but about discerning what produces life or death in the spirit. There is an interior sensitivity that reacts positively to everything that is from God and instinctively rejects what does not come from Him. This inner life possesses a wisdom that transcends intellectual knowledge. It knows without explaining how it knows. It discerns without needing to analyze. It chooses God's way naturally, like a tree leans toward light. This is the life of Christ operating through surrendered human personality. The final secret approaches, living no longer in the sphere of good and evil, but in the dimension of eternal life. At this level, decisions flow naturally from within, guided by a wisdom that Satan cannot understand or imitate. This is the life that overcomes the world and remains invincible. Genuine spiritual authority is born from total submission to God's authority. It is not conquered through position, knowledge, or personal effort, but received as a natural consequence of a completely surrendered life. Watchman Nee emphasized that whoever has not learned to obey will never know how to lead spiritually. There is a principle in the universe that governs everything. Either one is under God's authority or under Satan's spirit of rebellion. There is no neutral position. Those who serve God in their own strength, even doing apparently good things, are operating in the wrong principle and producing strange fire. True worship of God is always initiated by Him. When someone serves under His authority, they are accepted not for what they do, but for the submission they demonstrate. But when they serve by their own initiative, even if zealous and sincere, they offer something God neither asked for nor accepts. This revelation exposes the difference between religiosity and authentic spirituality. Many serve God without ever having truly submitted to Him. They do His work, but in their own strength. They preach His word, but keep the ego in control. This is the tragedy of much of what is called Christianity. The secret that Satan never managed to discover is here: true authority does not come from taking, but from giving. It does not come from exalting oneself, but from humbling oneself. It does not come from showing strength, but from assuming weakness. This paradox completely confuses the mind of darkness and releases the invincible power of God's kingdom through those who have truly died to themselves. Now you know the secret that God protected from the enemy throughout all history. It is not information that one learns in an afternoon, but an experience that one lives in a lifetime. Watchman Nee discovered that each moment of genuinely embraced weakness becomes a portal to power that transcends all human understanding. The paradox of the cross remains unchangeable. The more someone dies to themselves, the more alive they become in the spirit. This truth is not to be kept as secret knowledge, but to be lived as daily revelation. Each morning that dawns, each decision that is faced, there is a silent choice to live in one's own strength, or to allow Christ's life to flow through total surrender. What Satan never managed to comprehend is that the greatest strength is not in resistance, but in surrender. Not in fighting, but in resting in divine sufficiency. The invitation is before you at this very moment. It is no longer about trying to be a better Christian, but about allowing Christ to be Christ through your surrendered humanity. Each limitation you carry can transform into a window for God's power. Each assumed weakness can become a channel for supernatural strength. Your life no longer needs to be a constant struggle against circumstances, but can be the stage where God's glory manifests through a completely emptied vessel. There is no way to remain passive after this revelation. The secret has been exposed. The invitation has been made. The door has been opened. The only question that remains is, are you willing to die, to live, to lose yourself, to find yourself, to empty yourself, to be filled? This is not a call to an isolated experience, but to a transformation that redefines the meaning of existence. When you finally understand that you don't need to be strong for God to be powerful in you, you will discover that your weakness has always been His invitation to His strength. If this message touched something deep in your spirit, if you felt that you can no longer live the same way after hearing this truth, do not let this moment pass unnoticed. Share this video with someone who needs to discover that their limitations are not obstacles, but opportunities for God's power to manifest. Leave your comment telling how this revelation is transforming your perspective on weakness and strength. And if you desire to continue discovering these secrets that revolutionize the Christian life, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any message that can mark your spiritual journey forever.